Today we're going over the 5 most important rifles in history. The rifles on this list are the ones I think have had the biggest impact. They will not necessarily be the first rifle that did something. They will often be the first successful or the first rifle to really catch on that did something. As usual in my list, this is going to be a chronological list here, so this is not a ranking from 1 to 5. And as usual with my lists, we're going to start off with an honorable mention from the black powder percussion cap days, and that is going to be the pattern 1853 British Enfield rifle-musket. Now this was a .577 caliber Minet ball muzzle-loading rifle that was in fact rifled and not smoothbore. And this rifle was sent all over the British Empire, which in 1853 did cover a good chunk of the globe. Besides it being used with many wars in the British and also being sold to the Confederacy during the American Civil War, the thing that is probably most important about this is this was really the first firearm produced in Europe that was done with the American style manufacturing of replaceable parts. Everything prior to this over there was really hand fitted. Once you got into the replaceable parts and got into parts that were identical, then being able to repair firearms was just simply changing out a part in it. That was something that had caught on in the United States, but took it a little bit of time to get over there to Europe, and that's really the biggest impact that this had over the rest of the world. So going into our number 5 spot, we have the Remington rolling block. Now the rolling block is important because of its simple yet really strong action. It was very simple to produce. It was not expensive to produce, and it sealed up really strongly. It was so simple that you really couldn't mess up loading and shooting this thing. You couldn't have it out of battery. You couldn't do a number of the things that could happen with other firearms that were produced at the time. And the rolling block took off to be used by many different countries. You had the United States adopt it as the Model 1871, but you also had the Model 1867 Norwegian-Swedish model of this. You saw a wide range of South American countries use it, and as well as some places like Egypt use it. And there's still a lot of them around, partially because of how widely produced they were, but also because of that strong action has allowed so many of them to survive to today, most of those still being in usable, shootable condition. Number 4 on the list is going to be the Mauser. Now the Mauser took off to be probably the most important bolt action rifle ever designed. The Mauser 98, which is where all this kind of started off, was the first really successful iteration of the Mauser. You had a simple to use bolt on there. It allowed for feeding from the internal magazine really easily. We talked about how much the Remington rolling block was used in other countries, but the list of how many different places were using the Mauser is almost impossible. You've got a lot of European countries using it. You've got the Turks were using it. Of course, they are all over South America. The American 1903, while not technically being a Mauser, they did pay royalties to Mauser. It was basically a Mauser. I mean, you can look at the list here of how many variants there are of that Gewehr 98. You've got Mexican, Turkish, Chinese, Portuguese, Brazilian, Uruguay, Serbian, Argentine, Mexican, Chinese, Belgian. There were a bunch of Mausers that were made by DWM for Germany. There were a bunch that were made by DWM for other countries. There were a bunch of other countries making Mausers for themselves, and even some other countries making Mausers for other countries. Really, it just can't be overstated how many different places were using this design and how influential it really was. Now this next one, there was one that I was really wanting to put on this list. It was important because just being a major first, But really, there's just a lot of reasons to not put it on there, and good reasons to put something else in there in this number 3 spot. What I really wanted to put on here was the French RSC M1917, or the Fusil Automatique Modèle 1917. This was really the first gas-operated semi-automatic rifle that was actually fielded in any reasonable numbers to a military. I mean, the French were using this thing there during World War I. Now, the reason it ends up not making this list is because it was just really heavy and awkward, and they didn't really like it all that much, and the troops didn't like it. It was kind of hard to keep them working, and really not many of them have survived since then, just because of the limited time that it was made, the limited numbers, and just the fact that most of them that have hung around this long are just not operational anymore. So I tried to think of what could take this spot of a really important semi-automatic rifle. And the American exceptionalism ended up winning out in this case. And I went with the U.S. caliber .30 M1 rifle, better known as the M1 Garand, or the M1 Garand if you want to be that way. This was the first semi-automatic rifle to be a standard issue rifle. This means that it wasn't just given to some guys in limited numbers. This was the rifle that was handed out to pretty much everybody. And really during World War II, this thing really stood out for just how strong it was, because you had that semi-automatic capability that you didn't have with the other countries' frontline weapons there. You had 8 rounds in it, which at the time was pretty good, because you're looking at most of your Mauser-based ones having like 5. The en-bloc clips are a little weird, but honestly, they do load pretty easily in there. And they go ping when they pop out empty. You gotta like that. And of course, George Patton described it as the greatest battle implement ever devised, which at the time was probably correct. That just really became a game changer, and after that, you saw the bolt actions that everybody was using as their frontline weapons just go away, and quickly moved on to other things. Now, the next one to go into this number 2 spot is a case of another rifle that I really wanted to put into here, but it's kind of like the RS-17 in that it just didn't have a whole lot of time to be out there. It never really got completely refined, and it kind of just dropped off. And the one that didn't make the list here was the STG-44, or the Sturmgewehr. Now, Sturmgewehr itself, meaning assault rifle, this is literally the first assault rifle. They came up with an intermediate cartridge and a select fire rifle that could be easily moved around. It had an effective range of up to 300 yards, which is all you're really after for a battle rifle. And it worked really well every time the Germans took it out there in World War II. Problem is, it came along way too late in the war for it to have any impact for them, and they got defeated, and at that point, Germany couldn't keep making firearms. But there was something that it inspired, something that the Soviets were able to take and make, looking at that idea of the Sturmgewehr. That would be the Automat Kalashnikov, or the AK-47. The AK-47 may be the most famous firearm from the 20th century. If it's not the most famous, it is probably like the rifle that has gone everywhere. It just started off as this Soviet thing, started moving to other Soviet bloc countries, going into China, and just from there just spread off everywhere with these. They took those ideas from the Sturmgewehr, the ideas of the select fire, the intermediate cartridge, the portability of it, the detachable box magazine, all the great things that were on that. And they worked their own new design off of that was improved and better. Now this thing has showed up all over the world, for better or for worse. This thing has become so important for some governments that have been able to overthrow others and take over. The flag of Mozambique has an AK-47 on it. I mean, they felt it was so important to their country being able to exist that they put the AK-47 on their flag. And it's really the AK-47's versatility, the fact that it doesn't take a lot of maintenance to run it, that it's really pretty simple to run. These are all reasons that it has just taken off so well. And the last rifle on this list is going to be the AR-15. That is going to include all variants of the AR-15, including the M16 and the M4. Now this is kind of another instance of taking something that was around before and making it better. They took all the things that they had from the AK-47 that were great on it and improved on it. And the thing that is going to make the AR-15 so much better than everything that came before it is modularity. Being able to take pieces off of it there and change them out with something else that can go into the same spot there and just be a little bit different is a huge thing. I mean, you can kind of do that with the AK-47. I mean, they found ways to kludge, accessories and things on it. But if you want to like change out the buttstock on your AK-47, well, that's like a big freaking deal. You don't just go slap another one on there. The AR-15, that's a real simple change there. You can add different types of grips onto it. You can add different forends on it there, so you can add different types of accessories on there. You get trigger packs that have different types of trigger pulls and behave a little bit differently. Custom bolt carriers in there that can have different weights or act a little bit differently. What you see most commonly on an AR-15 nowadays is not that traditional military M16 loadout. It's going to be an array of other different types of things to allow you to customize it for your own personal needs there. You really have the most versatile firearm ever devised there, in a very nice cartridge that's a great middle ground for power and recoil. And if you don't want it in that caliber, it's pretty easy to get one or to adapt one to a different caliber, or there'll even be a bunch of parts that are interchangeable between them. I think it's really become the greatest rifle platform ever. So what did you think of this list? Is there something that you felt should be on there that I left off? Well, you can go down into the comment section and let me know. You can also give this video a thumbs up and a like. And you can also subscribe to my channel and click the little bell notifications to make sure that you catch all the videos that I post so you don't miss anything. I'm Jeremy with Poindexter G, and we'll see you next time.